Hey guys, what's up? I'm so excited for you to watch this interview. But before we get into this interview, I want to talk about our sponsor, PrimeXBT. If you're trading Bitcoin, you got to be using PrimeXBT. Not only do they have global markets available to anyone, but they also have great execution, low fees, and an amazing user interface. The best part about PrimeXBT is that you can also follow some of the best traders in the world. You go on, you find someone who you think is smart, and you can literally just follow their trades. When they execute something, your portfolio executes the same. And if you think you're one of the best traders in the world, then you can simply go on there and have people follow you, and you earn a little extra income by having those followers. So if you're trading Bitcoin anywhere in the world, you got to use PrimeXBT. They've won multiple awards for being one of the best trading platforms in crypto. You can trade spot markets or even use margin. So go on over to use PrimeXBT. You can go to the description and click on the link there. All right, let's get into this episode today. I really hope you guys enjoy this one. All right, guys, bang, bang. I've got Jonathan here with me. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Let's jump right into your background. Kind of how did you get started in the technology world and what did you do before Bitwage?
Yeah, sure. So I started my work life working sales at Oracle. And, it was not really that interesting of an experience. I would say it was more of a soul draining experience being there. So I spent a lot of my time learning about new technologies. And this is back in 2013. And I came across a TED Talk about the future of money. And Bitcoin was maybe half to a third of that piece. And I found it very fascinating. Concepts like being your own bank and self-sovereignty, concepts like more efficient international transfers, and banking the unbanked, right? These were the points that I talked about, and I was excited. So I went deep down the rabbit hole. About a month later, I came out this obsessed Bitcoin guy, right? And in 2013, an obsessed Bitcoin guy is kind of a weird, awkward thing to be, right? So being known as this guy, someone connected me to another obsessed Bitcoin guy who's at the tech side, who's working on the tech side at Oracle, and we got together and we started Bitwage. So how we came up with the concept is we were looking at what existed in 2013, and what you got to remember is Ethereum didn't exist when we were first thinking about this. The white paper came out a little bit after. And so the main thing to think about is what can we do with Bitcoin? Bitcoin is going to be the future of money. What doesn't exist that will have to exist? And what existed back then were exchanges, merchant processors, wallets, but there was really no system for getting money from merchants back to their employees or freelancers or even vendors, basically merchants doing their disbursements. And so we decided, let's be the first to do this. And that if this didn't exist, there would actually be no way for Bitcoin to exist within its own financial loop, right? Because there would have to be a cash out. So this was our way to close the financial loop and have Bitcoin essentially be able to live in its own ecosystem. So we did that. We launched in 2014. In July of 2014, my partner John and I quit our jobs about a month before that. And our first product was a company product. Companies would sign up and invite their workers and then pay their employees through us. And you might realize that 2014 wasn't really a great time to go after companies for this. This was just after a bubble crash, right? I think it crashed from like $1,000 to $400 during this time period. Trying to convince any company that this is a good idea, that Bitcoin is not just for hackers and drug dealers, was a pretty big challenge, and that caused us to create our second product, which is essentially a way to get a direct deposit account in the US and the EU or the UK. And then you can get paid from any company that's paying you, essentially globally into those bank accounts. And then you get paid in crypto. So now we have both of those two products, which actually are each now worth about 50% of our business, both of them. And there's two different use cases that are going on. One is the person who wants to get a percentage of their wage in Bitcoin, 5, 10, 15%, essentially dollar cost averaging. And then there are the people who are actually using this to get their wages across borders. So we have a lot of people who are getting paid in like East Asia, in South America, in India, these sort of places, who sign up with us, and then they actually get their entire wage through our system, and they'll get it in Bitcoin or as a local deposit into their bank account or something like that. And that's Bitwage today.
So when you think about those two different products, obviously the companies is pretty well understood. Go a little bit deeper on why an individual would want to get paid in Bitcoin other than just price speculation, right? In terms of there's plenty of people who say, hey, this is cool. I'm going to hold 1% of my assets in Bitcoin. Maybe it goes up a lot or maybe it goes to zero. That's just pure speculation. But then it seems like there's people who actually are doing this from a store of value standpoint or a efficiency standpoint or a censorship resistant standpoint. So talk a little bit about some of those use cases as to why people want to do this.
Sure. Yeah. And I think in the US, that particular use case of the store value is like, I'm actually thinking about this as my savings account, right? The cash supply of dollars increased 25% last year, but my dollars didn't increase 25% last year, which means they're worth less. So I need to now have something else to store my value, right? So that is one use case for this. Another big use case is not just looking at it from the perspective of dollars, but from other local currencies, right? So you can be in like Brazil or Argentina or some other country in Latin America, and you realize that your inflation is been skyrocketing since the beginning of COVID or even beforehand. Right? Or maybe there is a terrible local economic situation. Your president got caught for corruption. You just don't believe in your government, and you don't believe that your currency can hold its value. And these people are actually opting to get their salaries completely outside of the local their local currencies. So these people will get Bitcoin, especially if they're comfortable with it. I mean, these people know about Bitcoin. You're not getting a newcomer to get their entire wage in Bitcoin. But then you also get people who are getting their wages in stablecoins as well. And this is kind of like a stepping stone for these people because they're learning about private public key cryptography, but they're not dealing with the volatility of Bitcoin. So it's sort of their stepping stone. They're doing it. They're getting away from the local volatility on their own currencies as well. And then finally, you have the people in these countries where basically what happens in these countries is because people don't believe in their local currency, the price of Bitcoin gets a premium when you're trading to the local currency. And that premium doesn't get arbitraged out because these countries will often have capital controls that restrict your ability to transfer your local currency into dollars. So this premium exists because people understand the value of Bitcoin. But what this does is for our customers is they actually get to sell against that premium because they will, for instance, export services to a US company. They'll get the US price in Bitcoin, and then they'll sell it in the other country. They'll get that premium, and we can handle that for them so that they don't have to deal with any of that stuff. And in that case, the reason why they're doing this is so they can get a same day transfer instead of a multi-day transfer from the US into their bank account, and they can get access to better rates because of the Bitcoin premium that exists in those countries.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. When you think through the company side, talk about some of the companies that are starting to adopt this and kind of how it's going for them.
Sure. Yeah. So I'd say that in the beginning of 2020, what we really saw were more use cases either for cryptocurrency companies coming on or companies that are doing the cross-border. And actually, it was interesting because even during the bear market, there were companies doing the cross-border coming onto our platform, maybe paying like Filipinos and Indians or things like that. But now what we're seeing in bull market is that companies are realizing what I was saying before, which is employees should have an ability to get paid in a way where they're saving their wealth instead of losing their wealth slowly over time by holding dollars. So companies are coming in and they're saying we need a solution to help us do that. We are seeing companies, mostly like startup tech companies, for instance, recently we had Sequoia come up. There was big news that were doing this. This Sequoia was actually a cloud management company with hundreds of employees coming on. So we have a lot of interesting clients from this side, but then we're also seeing really big names coming in looking for Bitcoin payroll as a solution. You have Twitter, you have the Miami government that are both publicly talking about this, about offering it as a solution. And it's really coming down to the idea that people should have a way and an option to get paid in a deflationary currency where they can store their wealth forever. And companies want to support that.
And so when these companies are talking about this, are they talking about whether they're using your platform or not, paying 100% of the employee's salary in Bitcoin? Is it a percentage? Is it the employee's choice? How do you see them kind of adopting it?
Yeah, so the ability to get 100% of your wage in Bitcoin, I think that not very many people want to do that. It's pretty scary. I mean, even I don't get 100% of my wage in Bitcoin. I still do dollars. But I think that it's the option to do, 5, 10, 15, 20%. And usually it's the employee's option. So on our system, the way that it works is you can go in and you can change your percentage between any payroll at any point that you want, between dollars, Bitcoin, or maybe stablecoins or some other cryptocurrency, right? So you can choose that percentage, and that's what's being offered. For the company, they don't want to actually touch Bitcoin at all. Usually, there can sometimes be, tax issues involved in like buying a Bitcoin and then sending it off almost immediately. And so we handle that process for them. They are funding us in dollars, and then we are paying their employees in Bitcoin. There are cases where they do fund in Bitcoin, but the majority cases, I'm a company, my admin doesn't know anything about Bitcoin. I don't want them to like accidentally lose Bitcoin. So let's have a service where we just send dollars and then the employees choose how they want to get their paycheck.
Absolutely. And so when we think through kind of the employer receiving Bitcoin, it's essentially dollar cost averaging, right? They're just kind of over time receiving it. Talk a little bit about how much, are you guys educating people on that? Is that just something that people naturally understand? Is that a selling point to people to take their part of their salary in Bitcoin? Like, how does dollar cost averaging play into this?
Yeah, so dollar cost averaging is a very important concept. We actually created a dollar cost averaging calculator called bitcoindollarcostaverage.com to help educate people about this, right? And the general concept is that as long as what you're investing in is going to trend upwards, you don't have to worry about the short-term volatility cycles that are occurring when you make the investment, because instead of doing one bulk purchase, you do small ones over time. So a great example I'd like to think about a month ago, I was using this calculator and I wanted to see what would happen if I put $250 every paycheck, which was twice a month, starting from the height of the 2017 bubble, right? And what would have happened is I would have invested a total of $18,500 into Bitcoin, and I would have gotten 2.5 Bitcoin by that time. But if I had taken all that money and bought at the very top of the 2017 bubble, I would have gotten less than 1 Bitcoin, right? So this is the concept of, if you're afraid that you're about to buy at the very top, dollar cost averaging essentially removes the risk. Obviously, if you're buying at the very bottom, it's better than dollar cost averaging, but no one knows these things. No one knows the top. No one knows the bottom. I don't know these things. So if you want to get in and get long-term exposure, but you don't want to worry, is it the top, is it the bottom? Dollar cost averaging is the way to go. And getting your paycheck in Bitcoin is essentially the easiest way to do that, right? Because you're circumventing the process of having to essentially get dollars first before doing that.
Absolutely. I completely agree. As you think through kind of the, just massive surge of interest in this, how much of it has to do with COVID and the move to remote work versus this was just going to happen and it's less about COVID and remote work?
Yeah. So where Bitwage stands, we are, I see ourselves as in the middle of the two sections of remote work and cryptocurrency, right? Because not only do we have this dollar cost average use case, but we have this international use case where people are getting paid internationally doing work for US, EU, UK companies. And that whole remote work growth is really bringing that sector up. Additionally, we have the cryptocurrency sector. And what, in my opinion, is happening in the cryptocurrency sector is everything is being lifted by Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is being lifted by inflation, right? The dollar inflation. I was talking about this earlier. If you look at what happened in 2020, the monetary supply increased by 25%. If you look at how much real estate increased, I think it was around 15%. If you look at how much stock increased by the beginning of the year, it was in general, I think like S&P grew maybe 30%. So it's pretty close to the number of cash that was increased in that time period. And that's where cash has been going. It hasn't been going into everyone's pockets. It's been and it hasn't been causing food to rise substantially, the price of food to rise substantially, but it's been causing all real assets to rise substantially, and that's causing the movement in Bitcoin. So both of these two things, COVID was the catalyst for both of these two things: the remote work and the cryptocurrency industry, and that's why Bitcoin payroll is now really so hot, because you have the interest in crypto and the understanding to essentially need to hedge against your dollar holdings, but also because there's the growth in remote work, this use case, this cross-border use case is very valuable, right? Because we all know that a Bitcoin transaction is not entirely cheap. If you're trying to buy coffee with Bitcoin, it's really not that easy to do. Right now, I think you're paying like $10 for that transaction. But when you're talking about a paycheck, maybe it's $5,000 or it's something like that. You get an entire paycheck across borders in Bitcoin. That transaction cost is actually relatively low. And the way that we do the system, we're batching it all. We're doing batches of the transactions, so the cost is even lower to do a whole batch of Bitcoin transactions to everyone's paychecks around the world. So it makes sense to do this. The cost savings is there. It's real. It's relevant, and it's a real use case for Bitcoin.
Absolutely. When you think through kind of just the adoption of this, what numbers can you share with us in terms of whether it's the number of companies, the number of individuals, the amount that's being paid out, just any numbers that you can share with us so people can wrap their head around how popular this is?
Yeah. So we've done about $100 million in payrolls. We have 50,000 registered users on the platform. We have people in over 100 different countries who are getting paid. What we saw from the beginning of COVID, so in the beginning of COVID, we saw a 25% dip in our volumes, which actually made sense because people stopped getting paid during that time. Everyone was freaking out, didn't know what was happening. But since that bottom, we've actually grown more than 50%, and it's the growth line is looking really spectacular right now. And I think that this trend will just continue because of this COVID catalyst for remote work and the cryptocurrency industry.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. One of the arguments that people will make is like, why do we have to do this with Bitcoin? Why don't we just do it with stable coins? Do you guys support just Bitcoin? Do you support other crypto assets? And then how do you think through the pros and cons of Bitcoin versus any other crypto asset?
Yeah, sure. So we have Bitcoin, we have stable coins, and we have some other crypto. And if you think about like what are how we're actually using these things. So in the US, we actually do see people diversifying from Bitcoin into other cryptocurrencies. On the cross border, you pretty much only see people doing stable coins or Bitcoin. You don't see people diversifying in their cryptocurrencies so much. So when they're getting paid in stable coins, again, the idea is they are being self-sovereign to a degree, with owning the coins, although maybe the peg is not a totally self-sovereign concept, but they have more control of their money than they would otherwise. But they don't deal with the volatility of Bitcoin, which is like the stepping stone for people. Because a lot of people, they still want dollars. A lot of people in countries all over the world still want dollars, and it gives them access to this. But when we are moving money from one country to another, and then we're depositing local currency into someone's bank account, we often are using Bitcoin and not stable coins or some other cryptocurrency to do that. And people think, oh, why? Bitcoin is, slower or more expensive. But actually, Bitcoin is not that slow and it's not that expensive. And the reality is that it has the network effect of being really, really liquid. So if I wanted to go and sell $1 million worth of Bitcoin into a particular country, I can easily do that. And it's not necessarily possible to do that with other coins, with stable coins all at once without kind of crashing local prices and getting bad rates. So that's why we use Bitcoin behind the scenes, because of that network effect that it has and the liquidity that it has.
And then what do you see in terms of stable coins versus Bitcoin, like the adoption? Like what do people want, and kind of how do you see that breaking up?
Yeah, so I always think of stable coins as a stepping stone to Bitcoin, because Bitcoin has two big barriers to entry. The first is volatility, right? And there's a lot of focus on that. But the part that there isn't that much focus is the public-private key cryptography, right? How do you deal with that? How do you learn about that? I mean, if you're an average person trying to get Bitcoin, you've never even known about this concept before, right? And it's important for people to know, because that is the true value of Bitcoin, is owning your own money. And thus you have to understand how to protect your private keys. And what stable coins do is they take away one of those barriers to entry while introducing the other. So it becomes an easy way for people to enter the space, right? I know about dollars. If I'm in, Zimbabwe or, Venezuela, I believe that dollars is more stable than my local currency. So I would love to get access to dollars that I could use anywhere. And so stable coin. So then they want stable coins, and then they take those stable coins and they say, okay, how do I actually hold it? How do I actually use it? They learn about wallets and private keys and public keys and all this stuff. And now they know. And so the next step is basically when stable coins stop being so stable because the dollar or some other, major world reserve currency stops looking so stable. And when that happens, then it's a very easy switch to go from a stable coin to Bitcoin. So I think that stablecoins are not going anywhere. I think they have a very important role to what's going to happen around the world, because not everyone is ready to get 100% of their wage in Bitcoin. Let's just be real. But people, a lot of people are ready to get 100% of their wage in dollars, and this sort of gives people access to that. And at some point, there will eventually be the move to get into Bitcoin from there.
Absolutely. Before I let you go, I always ask everyone the same 3 questions. And then when we finish up, you'll get to ask me 1 question. The first question is, what is the most important book that you've ever read?
The most important book that I ever read?
Most important one.
The most important one. I really liked a book by Italo Calvino called "If on a Winter's Night." Oh man, I actually can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. Let me look this. Italo Calvino, postmodernist writer. Calvino. If on a winter's night, a traveler. That's what it is. If on a winter's night, a traveler. And so I read this, like a decade ago, this book, and it's basically a book about the journey to find the end of stories, right? And it has 2 parts to it, like a person who is looking for the story, and then the story itself. And right when it comes to the climax, it disappears. And it's this ending search try to find meaning in the end of things, and it sort of teaches you to appreciate the journey and not so much the end. So
I love that. It makes me it makes me remember the enjoyment is in the process, right? Not the final result, which I think that the greats always align on. So that's a great recommendation. Second question is more personal: sleep schedule. I used to sleep like 5 or 6 hours, but our friends over at 8 Sleep have me sleeping on this completely cold, kind of thermoregulated bed. It is fantastic. I sleep like a little baby now and get like 8 or 9 hours. It's completely changed my life. What's your sleep schedule and how has that evolved over time?
Yeah, I mean, I started off doing 6 hours. At some point in college, I switched to a 9-hour schedule. And what that ended up making me do was I was so efficient in learning that 2 days before all my finals, I didn't need to study anymore because I knew everything. And ever since then, that's what I've been striving for is 8 to 9 hours of sleep. And I try to be very rigid about it. Right now, during all the chaos that's happening, in crypto and at Bitwage, it's hard for me to find the time to do that. But when I have the time, I'm always trying to get 8 to 9 hours because then I'm at full brain capacity for the next day, and I always feel better.
I am a full convert to the sleep religion. I keep saying that because it is definitely true. Last question is more fun. Aliens, are you a believer or a non-believer?
I believe that the chances of there not being aliens is basically a non-zero, because the universe is so big. How can it be possible that this event of creating life only happened once? I think it's not possible. Have we ever had contact with alien life? That I don't know. I'm usually skeptical when I hear about people who think that we have had contact with alien life.
I completely agree there, my friend. Before you get to ask me one question to finish us up, where can people go and find Bitwage if they want to use it either as a company or as a employee getting paid?
Yeah, you can go to www.bitwage.com. You can follow us on Twitter at Bitwage. You can also follow me on Twitter at John Chest or me on Clubhouse at Jonathan Chester.
Ooh, we're getting the Clubhouse plugs now. You're the first person to plug the Clubhouse on the podcast. I like it. Yeah. Right, what one question do you have for me to finish up?
What question do I have for you? I wish you had told me I was going to have to come up with a question before, so I could come up with something fun. What's your favorite animal?
My favorite animal?
And why?
Probably a silverback gorilla, just because ain't nobody fucking with him. I don't know. I feel like I'm cool with a lot of animals, but the silverback gorilla just seems like he's one of those that just chills, nobody messes with, and if anyone does, they get reminded quickly as to why they shouldn't mess with them.
Nice, awesome.
All right, man. Listen, thank you so much for doing this. I'm a big fan of what you guys are building, and think that obviously everyone should take some portion of their salary in Bitcoin. You guys are empowering people to do that. So keep up the great work, and we'll definitely have to do this again in the future.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.